Greetings, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Dateline Downtown podcast. This is your host, Juan Hernandez, here with my co-host, Ted Shull.
Hey, everybody. This is Ted Shull.
On the show today, we have another special guest. You know, every guest that we have on is a special guest. And this guest, however, is one of our staff writers, GeRoyal Jackson. Welcome to the show.
Welcome, guys. How's everyone doing?
Excellent. Good to have you on, GeRoyal.
We wanted to talk specifically on this episode about the Ferguson case. I'm sure by now everybody's heard what's happened on the news, and just kind of shed light on the whole issue. You know, what happened and the aftermath and the reaction that people are getting, and tying in other cases that have nothing to do. That have nothing to do with Ferguson. I mean, they might be related, but you know, the circumstances are way different. So, GeRoyal, kind of give us a little insight on your perspective, the way you're seeing things on the news, and kind of, you know, shed light on this whole thing so that people out there can understand, be more informed, and have a better understanding on the case.
Cool. As far as the Ferguson thing goes, just, quick recap. Michael Brown, 18 years old, an African-American man from Ferguson, Missouri, which is a suburb of St. Louis. He was fatally shot by police officer Darren Wilson in August of 2014, which is just a little over 4 months ago. After that, there was rioting and a lot of protests, which led to riots, rather. And since then, there's been this whole birth of a movement across the country, to expose the excessive force of police officers. And I think that's what the central theme is. I recall you earlier saying that, what's the whole thing that's linking everything. But I think the central theme of this whole movement is that we're trying to expose the excessive force of police officers, the abuse of power of police officers, and try to, fix that and address that in our justice system.
Mm-hmm. And we were talking about before about how, they're in every profession, no matter the profession, whether it's police or in the medical field, there's always going to be people that abuse the system. In the case of police officers, using excessive force. In the medical field, doctors taking advantage of, prescribing medications that shouldn't be prescribed at such large dosages and stuff like that. And, in this case, in the Ferguson case, I mean, we saw that the evidence was presented when the verdict was given in terms of whether or not the officer was going to get indicted or not. And yet people still protested and argued over the fact that, I look at it as, what are you protesting about? It's not about, they're disregarding the fact that, he was shoplifting, he wasn't complying with what the officer told him. But again, I wasn't there, so I can't really give my own opinion on that, because my own version, because I wasn't there, so I really don't know.
And I feel that that's a great point, Juan. And it's funny because I actually even pointed out to Ted, prior to this, that I didn't feel that, Michael Brown was the best martyr for such a movement, because of the reasons that you just stated. He was a criminal suspect at that time. He was a shoplifter, but what brings me back to this, and what the subsequent cases that have hit the media afterwards, such as Eric Garner, such as Tanir Wright in Ohio, and we can go on and on, because this has been going on for so long, actually, that, it's been overlooked for so long. I don't think it's a matter of what they're protesting about. The issue is, and it shouldn't be about his criminality, pretty much.
Right.
There's, I don't think any of us would say that, well, I don't, for one, believe in justifiable homicide. I don't believe in that. I don't believe in, vengeance and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Or, what's the word?
Revenge and, I guess...
But the point is, I would say, is that whether he was a criminal or not, we've seen far too many cases where police officers or people in the justice system take far too much liberty, and they kind of change the rules when it applies to people of color. And that's why you have so many people across the country right now that are so concerned, that are, activists, that are, organizing and creating protests in every major city, because it's not so much about the fact that, here's this guy who we think is so angelic and, he was murdered and it's the police fault. No, I don't think it's that at all. I think that it's, the feeling of everyone knowing and starting to come to a collective realization that this is a problem within our society. This is a problem when, if you're a person of color, whether it be black or Asian or Latino, and you can be stopped and, this officer has control of your life.
Right.
That's the issue here. Officers are, the pillars of our society. They're there to, protect us. They're there to ensure our safety. But when you are in a situation to where you feel that if you're a person of color and you're in a situation where you're going to be stopped by a police officer, this person has complete control of your life, of your future, of your destiny. With one thing, one stroke of his pen, one word against you, he can change your whole life. Not to mention the force that could be, done to you. I mean, we have instances in the news like the past couple of years of police officers and teams that have thrown grenades into a baby's crib, We have instances, where Michael Brown has been killed, and, there's the Eric Garner case and the case of the, the 10-year-old kid in Ohio. And here in Houston recently, there was just the case where there was the off-duty sheriff's deputy who shot a civilian on the freeway in traffic.
As you just mentioned, it seems like there's a tendency sometimes for the media to place the deceased on trial, bring out all their past sins for the world to see.
Exactly.
And that's you wouldn't have that information if they hadn't been killed. I mean,
exactly.
Yeah. So I think that's partly a media effect, where the deceased essentially goes on trial.
And we see it in cases like the Zimmerman case as well. People want to bring that case up too. But, I feel really different about that case overall because, I would have reacted much differently in the way that George Zimmerman reacted because, you try to take up the role of a police officer and, once you know that something's going on, whether it's somebody like Trayvon Martin looking into other people's houses, your job as a security guard is to call a police officer.
And he wasn't even a security guard. He was a neighborhood watchman.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So for him to take that role, and it's just my opinion, but for him to take that role of something that he's not, it's, it's very tragic that a life was lost in Trayvon Martin, regardless of whether or not he was a criminal or not. But it could have ended the other way around. I mean, it could have ended positively.
Yeah, I mean, and again, I don't want to blur the distinction between the cases. What happened with Trayvon was another travesty.
Right.
And I'm glad actually that you brought that up because that's indicative of the fact that the whole justice system, and when we're talking about reform here, and I'm not one of the activists myself, but I'm somebody who is actively passionate about this issue. But when we're talking about reform here, we're not just talking about, let's just reform how we train the police with community policing. We're talking about our body cameras and all that. We're talking about the whole damn system, if I'm permitted to say that. Hot mic.
Oh, sure.
We're talking about the whole system needs to be reformed because of the fact that you have a case, you have pretty much you have a political system and a justice system where when there is a black victim or a black person that is someone who's the victim in a case where it's a person of non-color or a person of the law enforcement, of course, we're going to be the ones that are going to be viewed negatively. And as Ted just mentioned, a lot of times with, people of color, when there's a situation like that, the media puts the onus of blame or the onus of responsibility on that person, and that's completely unfair. Trayvon Martin was purely a victim, and the fact that, someone murdered him while he was walking in his own neighborhood, his father's neighborhood, and that person was also told to, withdraw, that person was acquitted. He went through a full trial, everything. That's indicative of the justice system that we have. There's something wrong with the system like that. There's something wrong with the system when, you're presented with all the facts of a case. Well, no, when you have a prosecutor, such as in the Ferguson case, who, completely bends the will of law to his own being. In the media, they were saying on across the media spectrum, MSNBC, Fox, and CNN, anyone can, get a grand jury to convict someone. You can get a grand jury to convict a hamburger, or you can get them not to indict a hamburger, so to speak. And I think that's pretty much what he did here.
It's very, very rare for the defendant to even be present in a grand jury hearing, and yet in both of these instances with Eric Garner and Michael Brown, defendant was present, and I think that shows how biased the prosecution was.
Exactly, and it also shows, how corrupted the system is.
Essentially, they tried to hold a trial in the grand jury proceeding,
Exactly.
which has a lower burden of proof.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then the other thing, too, that I would think that, I think that the prosecutors in these cases also were aware of the fact that, the public at large is expecting so much. The public at large is putting so much onus on these grand jury indictments. And so they're like, well, and so it's all political circus done in front of the camera. Like, why all of a sudden is there all these, surgings of grand juries? You, as a prosecutor, have the choice to go ahead. If you feel that there's enough case or enough of the evidence already, you can make a formal charge.
Yeah.
Now, in the case of Eric Garner, the coroner had already ruled that, this guy died of a homicide, which means that, his life would have still continued. He would still be alive today if it were not for, the interference of these officers at that set time. And so with them going ahead and foregoing this evidence presented to them and just letting this case work through a trial and going ahead and doing the grand jury indictment circus, and theirs was really like 23 people. Like, it was a grand jury. Yeah. Like, but I think it's just a circus pretty much.
And what do you feel that where this all leads to? All these protests in air quotes, and it really is a shame to see people reacting the way they're reacting. Looting places, burning down businesses. It's not. I mean, what are we gonna get from that?
As far as the looting and the rioting and everything else, like, I think that's just, I think it's a fallacy. I think that it's just something that, a lot of detractors can use and point out and say, oh, well, they're doing this, so their cause isn't just. Oh, and this and this and that. And I just feel that it's really rather convenient, but in a lot of cases, in a lot of instances in the history of the world, you've seen where populations have turned to rioting and, and that's King. Not, yeah. Well, no, it's not even just that. I'm saying like in the 60s when you go back to the hot summers when Bobby Kennedy was killed, and, you have Boston rioting, and you have, there's looting in the streets of New York and Chicago. Those weren't just exclusively black issues or black people looting. Right. And so when you have issues and you have these times that are hot and strife with political tension, there are going to be times like that. There's some people are bag eggs or whatever that are going to go and, have their own means. So I don't think that's just fair to just say, oh, well, this cause isn't just because you have people that are looting. That's not fair. You have these people that who are on the ground, that are actively organizing, who are actively protesting, who are actively trying to build momentum for something that they believe in. And as far as where I see it going, I feel like that this is, and I don't know. I feel as though it's a transcendent moment in our country's history. And not only our country's history, because the world is watching. Right. The world. The world over, it's kind of, I don't want to say second nature, but it's kind of assumed that, blacks are second-class citizens in all countries, and even in some African countries. I mean, let's be honest.
Right.
Like, you have South Africa where they, we literally are second-class citizens by, and so when you see this, like, I love the whole, just the simple slogan, Black Lives Matter. And it's not saying, it's not mutually exclusive, like white lives don't matter or Hispanic, like.
It's not saying that.
Exactly. Black Lives Matter because we have worth. And I believe that, even though we're in the 21st century in 2014 in the United States of America, I still feel that, my life isn't as valued as though if I were some blonde guy with blue eyes and,
And that's the reality, because I mean I can attest to that myself, being Hispanic. It really is a shame that we're all so divided, and who knows where this will end up. I always hope for the best, that eventually all this gets resolved. How much longer can we be divided like this? It's not the way to live. I mean, that's just how I feel.
Definitely.
There are plenty of instances of white college kids overturning cars and burning up buildings after championships and things like that, and those don't get the same kind of scrutiny or media attention, of course. And I was particularly struck yesterday when I was watching, the death of Mr. Garner in New York. One of the EMTs came up and casually checked for his pulse. Didn't even check to see if he was breathing. And she could have easily started mouth-to-mouth resuscitation at that point and saved his life, because the coroner claimed he didn't die until he was in the ambulance.
Oh, gosh.
And this was casual. They're just sitting there taking his pulse, and then she makes a statement, well, it's going to take at least 6 of us to get him on a stretcher, while he's there dying,
Exactly.
It's terrible. And here they indict the guy that's filming. They indicted the guy that pulled out his cell phone camera and started filming.
And of course, that's an attack on free speech.
Of course.
And I mean, and then where you have an example of where the system is broken right there is that took place in New York.
Yeah.
The most liberal, among the most liberal states and progressive states in our country. And in fact, New York City, the most diverse city in America and one of the most diverse cities in the world. And if you can't get a fair trial, if you can't have a place New York, or a system in place in New York where this is the most diverse city, maybe, in the Western Hemisphere, and that's to say that you have someone that's from India or from, Pakistan or, Asia or Africa or wherever, and you can't get a fair trial in New York. You can't say that if something happens to me and, there's another race or Caucasian race in play, that no one will treat me with dignity and respect, that no one will honor my victimization, no one will seek vengeance, or it's a damn shame.
Yeah,
it's a shame.
Because at the end of the day, aren't we all, as it's been stated for years and years, created equal? Then that falls to the wayside, and what are we looking at? Exactly.
I mean, even aside from being created equally, I just wish that my whole wish for the outcome of this movement, I'm prided by seeing so many people of different colors and different races that are taking part in this. I'm prided by the fact that, it's not just one-sided.
Right.
My wish, personally, is that people would get to the point that we realize that we're not different races. It's only one race. It's a human race. Race is a concept that's, a socially constructed myth. It's only about 400 or 500 years old. Heck, it's only a couple hundred years older than America. So, once we get past this idea that we're all some kind of different racial species or whatever, and we're all the same race, we're all the same species, we just have different ethnic backgrounds, I think we'll be so much better. I think we really will. But we have to change this mindset in America to where that if you're not white or you're not Caucasian, that, your life doesn't matter. That if if a police officer shoots you, then he was probably justified. that if you are, pass out on the street, then it's okay to be callous, regarding your body or your treatment and health. That has to change, and it has to change like yesterday.
Yeah. Right. Because even if he was justified, we don't really know that. If he was justified in shooting Michael Brown, we really don't know that for sure. Only he knows. And, at the end of the day, we can't... Yeah, sure, you can show your support for Officer Wilson or Michael Brown, whoever, but, we weren't there. Ted, you weren't there. You weren't there.
I wasn't there, but like I said, it's not about the issue about whether he was justified or not.
Right.
Like,
it's the mindset.
Yeah, it's the mindset.
That people have.
Because like you said, the grand jury spoke. Mm-hmm. The indictment is there. So it's not like it's gonna happen. Anything's gonna happen for him. But the mindset of we need to change the fact that Black lives do matter. People need to understand that as a people in this country, we're full citizens. I was born into this country as an American, just like,
Sure.
our white counterparts were, or just like white police officers were.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that, when they pull me over, I feel like I'm surrendering my whole life to them, that at any moment, like anytime I see a police light flash behind me, I call my mom and I say, Mom, I might not be home for a while. This is because I'm already preparing myself for the fact that this guy's going to find something on me. He's going to say, oh, well, this. And even if it is something minor, he's going to be an a-hole and be like, well, I'm going to do this and do that. And I've had it happen to me so many times, not to have it enforced in my brain that this is fact.
Mm-hmm. Of course, all white people are not of this mindset.
Of course, I'm sorry.
But, I myself feel somewhat guilty, because it's appalling that it's happening so often. And it's happened for so long. And I agree with you that I think that there is a dual system of justice.
Yes, exactly. Perfect wording.
That, I've had run-ins as a teenager, as we all have. And whereas, I might get... they might call my parents. I might get sent home. So you would probably end up in juvenile or something.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So I think that that just shows the dual standard that there is.
Perfect statement, Ted. I think what really encapsulates that perfectly is, if you guys remember the case maybe like a year ago, the kid from North Texas, he got into some kind of trouble and, his lawyer pleads some kind of defense like, well, my parents are rich, so I'm in I'm sheltered. I don't. Yeah. And it's like, what the hell? This kid is, a teenager like Mike Brown. Mm-hmm. He gets into trouble, criminal activity like Mike Brown. And instead of, being shot, wounded, fatally shot in the street, and, there's been this national controversy about whether, it was justified or not. That kid got probation. He got to go send to like some swanky retreat. And, the judge bought it and he's still doing well now. And so that right there is an example of what Ted just said about there being a dual justice system. Mm-hmm. If you're white and affluent, and I would even like to point out, too, that it's also an affluence thing because there are so many, Caucasian people, white people in this country that are marginalized just because they're impoverished. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And, and that's why, a lot of us do have strong bonds with each other. And so it's not like it's mutually or exclusively a black thing or a white thing. There is a dual system of justice. There is, needs to be a change in our justice system. And I think this movement is the start of that.
Yeah. And I was very happy to see that there were people of so many different races at these protests.
Exactly.
I thought that was very promising and points out the fact that you said it may not be a white-black thing. It may be more of a affluence or prominence, something like that. And that, we really need to find allies in this fight and in this movement and respect each other and work together.
And I would also point out, just as advice to organizers everywhere, control your messaging. be on one accord. You know, you don't all have to agree about all the petty principles and details, but, you know, in order for this movement to work, you guys are going to have to be coordinated. You guys are going to have to be on the same page, and you're going to have to move as a team. You know, one of the reasons why Dr. King's SNCC, you know, worked so well is because they were coordinated. You know, there was a system in place, and their messaging was universal. If you were going to do a protest in Selma, you know, it was going to be the same message that you were going to have, you know, when you were protesting in Atlanta. And so that needs to be universal. I don't think that anyone needs to, you know, allow a lot of outside forces that might be, you know, trying to do rioting and looting and all that kind of stuff control your messages.
Right. Any closing thoughts, Ted?
No, it's a pleasure to have GeRoyal here. We've been missing his work
time.
lately. Yeah, it's great to have him on.
It's
On
great
the
to be here,
podcast.
guys. It's great to be here.
And like always, you can always check out our social media sites. I'm sure you guys know by now. DatelineDowntown.com is the website where you can find everything. YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and just all the good stuff that's out there. You know, our podcast and our e-newspaper. It's all there, folks.
I also want to give a plug real quick to Dr. David Branham. He submitted an opinion piece to Dateline Downtown, which we'll be posting on our website. And it's entitled, "Ferguson Shows the Need for a Revision in the Criminal Justice System." It's an excellent written piece. We will be posting a link to it soon on our website.
Must read, guys.
Thank you.
And I want to say it's been a pleasure having you on, GeRoyal, to talk about, you know, not just the Ferguson case, but just about everything involved with the case. And I hope you guys out there listening get something from this, you know, become better informed, you know,
Yeah,
don't go based on just what the news sites say, you know, Fox, CNN, they're always one-sided. I'm sure you guys all know by now, but
You are your own best information source. Do the research, guys. We're in the
Exactly.
information age.
Exactly. There's no excuse for that. With that, thanks, GeRoyal.
Thanks for having me.
Go Gators.